Plastics have become such an entrenched part of our lives. But what exactly is plastic? And how is it made? Before plastic became so ubiquitous, it underwent a transformation from being a strictly natural product to being synthetically and widely produced. Some of the earliest uses of plastic date as far back as 3,500 years ago, when the Olmecs of Mexico used naturally occurring plastics, sap from gum trees, to create rubber balls. During the mid-19th and 20th centuries, synthetic plastics like celluloid and bakelite made their debut and were used for decades. On the molecular level, plastics are made of polymers, which are long, flexible chains of chemical compounds. This structure allows plastics to be easily molded and shaped, especially under heat and pressure. Unlike the rubber used by the Olmecs, most of today's plastics are man-made and derived from fossil fuels. Crude oil and natural gas are primary sources as they provide a cheap alternative to plastic made from plants. The first step in the production of plastic is the extraction of crude oil and natural gas from the ground. From there, the fossil fuels are sent to refineries where they are converted into several products, including the building blocks of plastic, ethane from crude oil and propane from natural gas. Ethane and propane are then sent to a cracker plant to be cracked or broken down into smaller molecules. Ethane produces ethylene, and propane becomes propylene. Next, a catalyst is mixed in, which links the molecules together and forms polymers called resins. This structure allows plastics to be easily molded and shaped, especially under heat and pressure. Polymerization converts ethylene into the resin polyethylene and propylene into polypropylene. These resins are then melted, cooled down, and chopped up into pre-production plastic pellets known as nurdles. Nurdles are later transported to manufacturers who use heat to mold the nurdles into different types of plastic products. Many of those products actually feature information about their manufacturing process. Numbers called resin identification codes are often featured, indicating which chemicals were used to make the plastic. Because of plastic's utility, its global production has doubled about every decade. The amount of plastics produced since 1950 has measured at about 9.2 billion tons, the weight of nearly 1,600 Great Pyramids of Giza. Much of this plastic ends up as trash. Single-use plastics such as straws, grocery bags, and packaging products are particularly detrimental. They often aren't recycled and constitute about 40% of all plastic waste. They end up damaging natural habitats, endangering wildlife, and polluting communities around the world. Moving forward, a great way we can counter this plastic pollution is to reduce the amount of single-use plastics we use. By opting instead for reusable alternatives in our day-to-day lives, each person can make a huge impact in helping decrease plastic waste. For plastics that are already produced, other solutions are being explored. Scientists have discovered that a few organisms are capable of breaking down plastic material. Waxworms and mealworms, for example, can devour plastics and turn them into compost. Another plastic-consuming organism is a microbe, which shrinks the time plastic takes to degrade from hundreds of years to only a few days. Change is happening in the production of plastics as well, with some manufacturers turning back to plants for ingredients. Called biodegradable bioplastics, these materials are as durable as synthetic plastics, come from renewable resources, and can therefore biodegrade. Even the rubber tree, the same plant used by the Olmecs, is once again being sourced for plastic. Today, The tree's latex is used to create a range of products, such as all-natural latex rubber gloves, tires, and mattresses. The rubber tree itself is now part of a global initiative for the natural and sustainable sourcing of plastic. Plastics can be found almost anywhere, but by understanding its chemical makeup and our uses for it, we can benefit from its versatility while also being mindful of its impact on our planet. Take your pledge today to reduce single-use plastics.
All right, so can folks give me a thumbs up? Was the sound okay on that? You were able to see and hear the video? All right, good. That was my biggest fear. I tested that several times. So now we'll move into the second video, which is a little bit more on sort of our recycling conundrum and the fact that we all thought by putting our plastics in the recycle bin, something useful was being done with it, and it may not be the case. So let's see how this one goes. This is a full hour video. We're not gonna run it the whole time. I'm gonna cut it off at about 15 or 20 minutes. I know there's a place where it kind of logically makes sense, and we'll cut it off, have a little bit of discussion, and then we'll turn it over to Jennifer to kind of bring our discussion from the global scale back down to the local scale and what we can do.
Oceans are swimming in it. Rivers are choked with it. Coastlines are collecting it. Landfills are clogged with it. Our trash bags are filled with it. And it's even floating in the air we breathe.
Imagine spreading out 9 billion metric tons evenly. We could cover an area the size of Argentina or California 6 times over.
It's plastic, the material we can't seem to live without that also lasts longer than a lifetime. Plastic can take hundreds of years to break down, and even then, only into microparticles. It's hurting animals. It's in our food chain. Plastic is everywhere.
For more than a year, my PBS NewsHour colleagues and I traveled far and wide, reporting on what experts call one of the largest environmental threats to our planet. In this special report, we go farther.
Plastic pollution is becoming a worldwide crisis.
And dig deeper.
So how is that really helping the problem?
To figure out if and how we can fix our plastic problem.
I don't think we can keep on living and moving forward the way that we have.
I spent time with the Popa family in Toronto, Canada, who are in the middle of a plastic purge. Mom Vicky made a New Year's resolution to consume less and reuse more. She's now working to get the entire family on board.
Plastic gets into the ocean, and then fishies eat it, and then they get sick.
We're sort of telling our family and friends as well that we want to live this lifestyle. We're trying to reduce our impact on the planet. We're trying not to accept packaging and plastic and bring it into our household. And they do actually listen. And so I notice a change.
But thousands of miles away from the Popa family, on one of the most remote islands in the world, the plastic problem is only getting worse. This is Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as locals call it. Sitting in the middle of the South Pacific, its closest neighbor is more than 1,000 miles away. All along the rocky coastline, chunks of plastic are easy to spot. Not so easy to spot, the microplastic hiding in the sand, as my NewsHour colleague Jeffrey Brown found.
This is microplastic, this is a rub, this is a plastic.
For cleanup crews here, it's a never-ending battle.
Maybe if clean all day, it's not possible.
Cleaning all day is not enough.
It's not enough because the center for the plastic is not here, it's there.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
The trash is mostly coming from what's called the South Pacific Garbage Patch, an enormous swirling vortex of marine debris, swept up in ocean currents and collected into a trash mass 1.5 times the size of Texas. That patch was discovered in 2017, 20 years after scientists discovered the Great Pacific Patch, 2 swirling masses of debris 3 times the size of France. On the shores of Easter Island, Ana Maria Gutierrez does what she can to organize beach cleans.
Es deprimente.
It's depressing because you find all kinds of plastics, from buoys to shoes, even car parts, everything. It's like a dump, but in the ocean. It just arrives. But the worst is that because the waves hit the coast, the bigger plastics get smaller and smaller, and it's very difficult to remove them because you have to move very big rocks along the coast and the trash just gets inserted in them, and it's becoming part of nature.
The world is trashing the ocean, and that trash, we're receiving it in our coast, in Rapa Nui. It's like someone putting a gun in your head and telling you, you must receive that.
Pedro Edmonds Paua is the longtime mayor of Hangaroa, Easter Island's one town. He says over the years, the plastic problem has only gotten worse.
It's coming from everywhere. It's too much. Every year is more and more.
And those tides of plastic aren't just a blight on the landscape, they're hurting wildlife around the world. According to one study, if current production trends continue, by the year 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in our oceans.
When they come up into the nest.
In Costa Rica, my colleague John Yang learned how plastic affects an already endangered species.
This is stuff you've just picked up on the beach.
I literally
here.
just found this here. Yeah, this is a really clean beach. Plastic gets into the marine environment. It breaks down into tiny little pieces called microplastics, and anything that eats in the ocean will inadvertently eat plastic. That's killing turtles. Up in Florida, they've got a hospital now where when a turtle comes in, they no longer say, does the turtle have a plastic in its belly? They now say how much plastic is in the turtle.
Oh my God.
In 2015, a marine biologist's video went viral, documenting the painful process as she removed a plastic straw stuck in a sea turtle's nose.
Oh man.
What happens is the turtle comes up to breathe and inhales the straw, and then they get lodged in their faces. And this is becoming more and more common. It's not a one-off anymore.
In the Philippines, a whale washed ashore in 2019 with nearly 90 pounds of plastic in its stomach. Seals are getting caught in fishing nets made out of plastic. They're called ghost nets, abandoned by the fishing industry, and an estimated 640,000 tons of them are floating in the ocean. That's 10% of all known ocean plastic. And it's not just turtles and seals that are at risk. Scientists say nearly every seabird now eats plastic trash, mistaking it for fish. Even here, the Mariana Trench, in the deepest part of the ocean, plastic has found its way more than 6.5 miles down.
Oceans get a lot of attention, but experts say the problem is much bigger than that, including here, the largest freshwater system in the world.
On the shores of Lake Ontario, one of the 5 Great Lakes, we combed the water's edge for plastic with ecologist Chelsea Rockman.
Here's some plastic, here's some plastic, here's some plastic, and then you don't have to look very hard to find it.
On some beaches, we found big chunks of plastic. Along another part of the shore, microplastics.
The thing that sticks out to me the most here are all of these kind of perfectly spherical little pellets.
Yeah, what are those? I noticed those too. They're different colors, right?
Yeah, they're different colors. These are pre-production pellets. There's a lot of plastic production facilities just north of here and in Toronto in general. And so what we see here is basically spillage. These things are lightweight. They make a ton of them. When they're moving them around on the shipping dock or in the facility or transporting them, they blow away easily. They can end up spilling on the dock, they go down the drain, and they end up here.
Okay, so this is all rinsed out now.
Rockman uses a sieve to collect samples of the microplastics, then takes them to her lab to study their makeup.
What happens is over time the sun degrades the bigger things into smaller and smaller pieces, so this is like one stage in the breaking down, and then if we look in here you can see some bits of fragments that aren't perfect pellets, you know, that are further down in the process. So they just break down smaller and smaller and smaller until you have a greater quantity of smaller pieces of plastic.
But the point is they never go away.
Yeah, like, you know, never is a strong word, but the rate at which they break down is incredibly slow. So every piece of plastic that's ever been produced, unless there's something we don't understand yet, is likely still here today in some form.
Rockman began her career studying the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but a move to teach at the University of Toronto put the Great Lakes in her backyard.
So when you think about the ocean, it's this dilute body of water. The oceans are vast. Lakes, while this is vast, are quite small in comparison. Cities surrounding it are bringing trash into the lake, and it's concentrating in there and not diluting into a different location, at least not at any pace, you know, we can understand.
So does that mean that the plastic in a lake is more damaging to the environment?
We sample fish from the ocean. We might find plastic in 1 in 4 fish, 1 in 10 fish. Here, my students sample fish from this lake. They find it in every single fish that they sample.
Every single fish?
Every single
coming
fish
from this
that we
lake.
sample from Lake Ontario has at least 1 piece of microplastic in its stomach, which to me shocks me, right? And I've been researching this for more than 10 years.
And that means fish aren't the only ones eating plastic. If humans are eating fish, are we ingesting plastic too? Part of Rockman's research is trying to answer that by looking inside the fish.
We know there's plastic in the water.
Yes.
We know that the fish eat the plastic.
Yes.
We have no idea if when we eat the fish, we're also eating plastic. And how much do we know about what effect it has on us when we
So
eat it?
on humans, we know very little. There are some researchers starting to get into this field. That's something we're trying to understand in our lab is how does plastic move through a food web? Is it just staying in the gut content of animals and I'm only exposed when I eat the gut, like an oyster or mussel? Or is it transferring out of the gut into other parts of the body and actually moving up the food chain the way like a chemical contaminant does? So we're still trying to kind of understand that part. It's kind of weird. It's like there's this black.
So can I ask you, knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
do you still eat fish?
I do eat fish.
You do?
I do because we still don't know a ton of information about the health effects. The other reason I still eat fish is because yes, they eat plastic, but like I know it's in my drinking water and I know it's in the air, like in the dust. So if I eat a piece of fish, it's not that different.
So plastic is in the fish. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's even on your plate. Where isn't it? Look, more than 9 billion metric tons of plastic have been produced since 1950. That's the weight equivalent of 27,000 Empire State Buildings or more than 1 billion elephants. So when and how did our addiction to plastic first begin?
What can be made with plastics? Cosmetic containers and cockpit housing.
Plastic was a new material that transformed the consumer landscape. When large-scale production began after World War II, the potential for growth seemed unlimited.
This paratrooper floating down to welcome Mother Earth is depending on plastics to get him there safely.
The durable material did and does make some aspects of life safer,
They take better care of little cuts and scratches.
not to mention more convenient. And ultimately, over decades of use, a disposable way of living evolved.
It's tough and light.
Its future was so limitless that by 1967, Dustin Hoffman received this career advice in the film The Graduate.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
Exactly how do you mean?
There's a great future in plastics. Think about it.
Plastic has revolutionized the medical field. Disposable syringes help reduce disease transmission. Prosthetic limbs make life easier and more comfortable for amputees. In grocery stores, plastic helps reduce food waste by keeping foods fresher. And don't forget, mobile phones have many plastic parts. Over time, the global appetite for plastic has only grown.
It's very cheap to produce. It's very, very useful, very versatile, so we just make a lot of it.
Okay.
Roland Geyer at the University of California, Santa Barbara is an industrial ecologist who quantified the problem. He says of all the plastic, an estimated 60% still exists on Earth today.
Of the 9 billion metric tons that humankind ever produced, maybe 20 to 30% is still in use, and the rest, so that's about 6.5 billion metric tons, has become waste.
And it's ended up in landfills.
Ended up either in landfills, in the environment. A tiny fraction was recycled, and then an equally small fraction was incinerated.
In 1950, world production of plastic was a mere 2 million tons a year. Since then, annual production of plastic has increased by nearly 200 times, jumping to 350 million tons a year.
Now we produce more plastic than most man-made materials. Every year we make 6 times more plastic than aluminum. We make 20 times more plastic than copper. And even metals, corrode and erode, so they would eventually sort of go back to the natural environment. Plastic just stays plastic.
So all the reasons we like it and value it and want to use it, those are all the reasons that make it more difficult to get rid of.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, some of these wonderful properties, that it's so durable, becomes a problem when we are trying to get rid of it. Then suddenly we don't like the fact that it's so durable.
As our dependence on this durable new material has grown, so have the piles of stuff in our landfills. But it hasn't always been like this. Americans were at one time very good at saving and reusing materials. In colonial times, the motto was waste not, want not. During the Great Depression, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without.
In the throes of World War II, the U.S. government ran campaigns to get citizens to save and reuse everything from scrap metal to rubber, gasoline, paper, and even animal fat.
People who buy in large quantities and truck it away in their cars.
And then came the economic boom years, coinciding with the rise of plastic.
It's the crystal clear plastic that lets you see everything you wrap.
And disposable lifestyles became fashionable.
Clings like magic.
It was even featured in Life magazine in 1955 with the celebratory headline, "Throw Away Living."
Daddy, you forgot. Every little bit hurts.
Also in the 1950s, the formation of the Keep America Beautiful Coalition. Using public service announcements starring a Susie Spotless character, the coalition aimed to get people thinking about their responsibility to stop pollution.
Please, please, don't be a litter bug, 'cause every little bit hurts.
Decades later, in 1971, it was a Keep America Beautiful ad that shook the American conscience.
People start pollution. People can stop it.
The Keep America Beautiful Coalition was founded and funded in large part by the beverage and packaging industries, the same companies producing much of America's plastic. Since that campaign, we, the American people, have been sorting, weeding out, and sorting some more, all with a certain sense of responsibility.
Every day, an estimated 750 tons of material flow through this process. And every step along the way, just like this one, is designed to remove one more material.
For an ultra-durable material like plastic, the goal of this system was to get us to use less by reusing what we'd already made. But that requires people buy into and participate in the system.
The global recycling rate, we estimate as 9%, so it's very, very poor, and it hasn't even improved all that much. The current recycling rate in the US is barely 10%, but even in Europe it's like 30%. I would say that the way we recycle plastic at the moment is not part of the solution. I would even go as far as saying it's part of the problem.
Recycling is part of the problem. Why is that?
So even recycled material, you can't cycle it forever. Eventually, you have to dispose of it. So the only way to reduce disposal is make less plastic, and that's the only benefit of recycling.
One reason, the sheer volume of waste created around the world. Americans alone create 4.5 pounds of trash per person per day. As a country, we generate 1/3 of all waste in the world. In a best-case scenario, we'd recycle as much of that as possible. My colleague Paul Salman met a woman in Massachusetts who is a recycling superstar.
This is 2 weeks worth of trash.
That's 2 weeks.
And plastics, these are flower sleeves. I try always to tell them I don't need a flower sleeve when you buy flowers, but sometimes I'm not quick enough. Like compost tea bags, so this is the string, and because it has a staple, so it shouldn't go into the compost.
Really?
The tea bags, yes, I'm very anal about this.
So are you kind of a recycling fanatic?
I wish there was a word like OCD for recycling.
Not everyone is as vigilant as Meera Singh.
People today don't understand what happens to their trash or their recyclables. They put it out at the curb, a truck comes along, throws it in the back, and it disappears, and they don't have to ever think about it again. 460 tons again today?
Yesterday, the day
Man,
before.
oh man.
Ben Harvey runs a recycling plant just outside of Boston.
When we collect it, we've got to think about where are we going to go to dispose of that material. Was it going to go to a landfill? Is it going to go to waste to energy?
The process is more complicated than simply dropping a bottle into the right bin. There are 7 types of plastic, and not every type can be reused.
The plastics that we see come through here, even though they've got the little recycling logo on the bottom of it, that doesn't mean that there's a market for that material, that we can recycle that.
For a long time, Harvey sent Boston's plastic to China. Until 2018, it had the corner on the market. And that's where many recycling facilities in the U.S. sent their plastic to. Greg Cooper leads recycling efforts for the state of Massachusetts.
About 20, 30 years ago, when we were starting to ramp up our recycling programs across the country, I think China saw an opportunity to utilize some of the materials, the raw materials and the commodities that we were producing through recycling.
But environmental protection and a reputation makeover put an end to that. In March of 2018, China stopped buying plastic recyclables completely in an operation dubbed National Sword, refusing to be the world's dumping ground.
Right now, we're not moving any material to China. Very difficult to move into China right now.
So all that material started stacking up in Mark Ghilardi's Save That Stuff warehouse.
Inventory is a little high. It does come in waves because we do have to sell multiple loads at a time. So when we get a shipment, we'll ship out 3 or 4 loads. So we're trying to do price adjustments, and that's why it's really hurting our bottom line. We can't do the adjustments quick enough to keep up with the changing markets.
With prices for plastic tanking and global markets shifting, as much as half of America's plastic waste was and is stuck in the U.S., stockpiled in warehouses, disposed of in landfills, or incinerated.
And the plastic that was still being shipped overseas started flowing to new countries, this time in Southeast Asia. Malaysia quickly took up the mantle as the world's leading importer of plastic scrap. Here in Ipoh, that meant mountains of plastic piled up at the edge of the jungle as plastic waste inundated recycling plants.
We are standing here next to a pile of about 1,500 tons.
This Malaysian site is run by Pavel Cech with a government license. Here, the plastic waste goes into a kiln to help in the production of cement.
The first waste started coming here mid last year, and that was the time of the boom of the imports.
Since then, the piles of plastic waste have shrunk, but the proportion of plastic waste coming from Western nations hasn't.
Here you have post-consumer cake or pancake from Germany. Can you make anything out of that? Yeah, USDA organic. So here you have some organic American vegetable packaging. Here we have a Pepsi bottle with no local printing.
Cech sees real value in the global trade in recyclable commodities, but not in plastic scrap.
Mixed waste, non-recyclable waste definitely should not be traded. It has to be a product. It has to be raw material, but it must not be a mixed, non-recyclable liability of one country to be passed on to another country. Because then you see the greed, then you see that for money people are ready to do bad things.
Cech's site is legal, but illegal sites like this one we secretly filmed have been popping up all over the country as the opportunity to turn a profit grows. One way to get rid of the plastic waste? Burn it. That illegal activity spurred citizen activists to take action. They used drones to find the worst offenders, then lobbied the government for change. As the influx of plastic waste grew, the Prime Minister took notice.
We cannot accept that kind of idea that waste from rich countries should be sent to poor countries. We don't need your waste because our own waste is enough to give us problems.
Before long, in October of 2018, Malaysia, like China before it, banned new imports of plastic waste. Malaysian officials turned away arriving shipping containers filled with plastic from Western nations that were being smuggled in, destined for illegal sites. In front of a crowd of media, the Malaysian Environment Minister showed off what was inside.
Whoever that sent
their waste to Malaysia, whether it's e-waste, whether it's plastic waste or whatever waste, we will send it back. And we will fight back. Even though we are a small country, we cannot be bullied by developed countries.
The crackdown had the unintended effect of pushing illegal sites into more unpopulated areas, away from the eyes of law enforcement. And now plastic waste smugglers are taking their business away from the cities and deeper into the jungle. The burning sends a toxic brew into the air. Sunny Neo is an activist working to stop the illegal activity. He uses a particle counter to take air quality readings. Anything over 35.4 is considered unhealthy. Here, the reading settled at 123.
But these people are doing in complete defiance of the government and polluting the environment, doing things that are harmful to our society.
All right, I'll stop that video there. We can share the link so that you can watch the rest of that if you'd like. As you saw, it's a PBS NewsHour video that continues on in depth on the problems that we're having with recycling. But I wanted to give us time to bring it back down to the local scale and let Jennifer talk about the recycling programs that we have locally, the things we can recycle and that actually do get recycled. But then, you know, the recommendations for how we can at least do our own part to address the plastics. I also tried to get some information on plastics in our own watershed and in the Fox River, and I wasn't really able to come up with much data. Gary Swick, I know you're on. I don't know if you've ever seen any data on the amount of microplastics in the Fox River or not. You know, we know it's in there. We've just seen the whole pathway on how it gets there, and that we know that it's in there.
I don't think there's anything on it, and we just connected with the defenders of McHenry County to talk about doing a study, but we connected with a professor, and it's pretty high level science stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we can do a cleanup and we can look at stuff, but
we look at big plastic, but yeah, looking at how it gets broken down. So some things to think about. All right, so with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer Jarland, who's the recycling coordinator for Kane County.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right, thanks. And how long does this meeting go for? How long do I have?
We'll try to be completely wrapped up by 2:30.
Okay. Okay. I thought it was an hour-long meeting, and I was thinking, oh, I've got a shorter time.
Yeah, no, an hour is never enough time for our topics.
Okay. No worries. So, hi, everybody. I see some familiar faces and names on the call here today. Elise, hi. Good to see you again. I was going to talk a little bit. Oops, is that me? I don't know what that.
Sorry, that was me. Are you seeing that?
Okay, that's all right. Let me go back. So I was going to talk about the recycling crisis of our times, which was the end part of that video we just saw. So that was great. That took care of that for me, and we'll save a little bit of time, but just basically the legislation passed by China, which created that whole rearrangement of where our recyclables were going. And I'll go into that a little bit more about what Illinois, the state of Illinois, did in response to that to try to help. I'll talk about the 3 R's plus some, whoops, touchy little button, and composting. I'll talk about the guidelines for do's and don'ts of recycling and some options for beyond the bin, where you can take things to get them recycled, but you can't put them in your curbside bin. I'll talk about the Kane County recycling events and drop-off locations, and a little bit more about the green guide, the solid waste plan, and I will leave time for questions and answers at the end. So you're welcome to put them in the chat, but I probably won't respond to them till the end, because sometimes I cover the information as I go through. And so what happened when the national sword legislation started to really have effects here? I mean, they were giving us warning signs for years that this was an issue with them, that we were sending them all this contaminated recycling. It wasn't clean materials. It had a ton of garbage in it, and they were saying, you know, something has to change. But you know, nothing changed until they just said, oh, that's it, we're not taking it anymore. Then we started to see the effects here. And here in Illinois, a task force was formed to address the contamination that was going into the recycling bins, all of the stuff that was going in there that shouldn't be. And this was a group of stakeholders from around the state that included program management coordinators like myself, and the people that run the sorting facilities and the hauling companies, and the governments, local government, state government. And we came up with, what can we do with zero budget, first of all, and education is key. So we thought, well, what can we do to try to help this situation? And we created a poster, which actually, I have my slides in a different order this one. We created a poster that shows you what you can and cannot recycle. And we made it fairly simple, and I'll get into the details of that in a moment, but this is the poster here. And we just came to consensus about how we could try to make it as simple as possible to understand. So I'm going to just skip to that, because I'm going to do this presentation a little bit differently according to. So what we did is we reformatted all of the guidelines for the state, tried to get it out to all of the different people who are doing education, all of the haulers, all of the local governments, so that we were communicating the same message, because that's really a big part of the problem, is that there's all these nuances of the different educators giving different information. And so don't be discouraged as I go through these, because you'll see things that you've been doing. Maybe you've been putting something in that you shouldn't be. And in any case, this is why I'm here, is to help you kind of understand what the guidelines are and how to do it right. Firstly, there's two things that make something recyclable, and that is if it can be sorted using the technology that we currently have at the sorting facilities. And you saw a little bit of that on the video, those conveyor belts with all the material running down it and people hand picking things off. Also a series of different machines that include magnets and air and sorting wheels that try to separate all the different stuff. They are amazing that they can take what we call single stream recycling, which is all the paper and containers mixed together, and then separate all that out, but there are limits to it. So some things just can't be captured using that system and sorted out correctly. The second thing that makes something recyclable is that it has to have a viable market, somewhere to send that material then in bulk, where they will take it down to its base, you know, for example, plastics-based polymers, and then turn it into a new product. And there's just a lot of issues with the markets right now, somewhat dependent on what happened with the Chinese legislation, but also just markets fluctuate. And so I liked how he said in the end of that video that recycling is not the solution, and maybe even part of the problem. I totally agree with that. That's why, and I'm going to go back now, the 3 R's that we know, reduce, reuse, recycle, you'll see that recycle is at the end of that list. And rethink is another R that I always put actually at the front end of that list. Rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost. But recycle is definitely not the first thing you should be thinking of. Rethinking our purchases and our consumer habits. So, and that was another quote from the Popa family segment, where she was trying to eliminate plastic. Consume less and reuse more. That's a huge message. We are, you know, I know I'm talking to the choir here, but this is just a huge issue in our society, and especially in this country and other, you know, affluent countries, is that we just consume things often without thought. Even I myself do it, you know, like you go and you think, oh, I need that thing, and then you get it home and go, oh my God, look at all this packaging that's on this. And it's just so hard to avoid, because it's the way that our society has come to at this point. So we have to rethink, and I have a little story about that, and reducing and reusing before we even get to recycling. And I would love to talk about composting, but I don't have a lot of time today, so I'll leave it here just on this slide to say that Composting our food scraps is really key. And if you have a way to do that in your backyard, please figure that out and do it. You know, make yourself a little bin or buy a soil saver bin and compost your food scraps and your leaves. That is got a huge impact in reducing methane. Also, there was a little piece in one of those videos about the biodegradable plastics. You know, I have an issue with those because often, first of all, there's a differentiation between biodegradable and compostable. Everything is biodegradable. It will break down eventually, but you know, plastic just breaks down into smaller pieces and smaller pieces of plastic, becoming microplastics. It doesn't really go away. Compostable plastic is made out of organic materials, and it is theoretically supposed to break down if you send it to a commercial composting facility, which often they don't go to, and they're still just single-use products. So, you know, I also want to say just avoid single-use products if at all possible. But yeah, composting food scraps is key. The compostable serviceware I'm a little dubious on. So I would just say reusable, like, you know, use a glass, carry your bamboo fork and spoon around with you, that sort of thing. So here's my story about rethinking. The average American creates 4.5 pounds of landfill trash every day. That's a known statistic. It could be a little bit higher than that at this point in time, but that's 135 pounds a month. It really adds up for one person. So I read that statistic years ago, and I decided to do a little project in my home of zero waste and see how low I could go if I tried for 30 days to make as little waste as possible, hopefully zero. At the end of the month, I had 4 pounds of trash that all fit into this Tostito bag. And it was mostly just plastic wrappers off the top of vitamin bottles. And, you know, so I recycled everything that I could. I composted everything that I could. I shopped in bulk with my own containers so that I had less packaging. I sewed my own net vegetable bags. And even then I ended up with a whole bag after 30 days because it's just unavoidable. But that was myself and my husband and my mother who visited for 2 weeks. So it was actually 2.5 people over 30 days, 4 pounds of trash. That's a huge reduction. And you know, that's what you can do if you rethink. Just start looking for ways that you can shop differently. And a friend of mine gave me this great tip: shop around the outside of the grocery store, where the fresh vegetables are, where the meat is, and you know, you'll actually, where there's not as much processed foods, is around the outside of the store, the bakery, the bread, which you can get in a paper bag that you can recycle. You know, so there's ways to reduce trash, and I found it's more healthy also, that food that has less packaging, interestingly. So this is where I usually assign some homework, and I say to people, go have a look at your trash can today. I usually say go home and have a look, but you're probably already at home, so you can just stroll out after this presentation and have a look in your garbage can and see what's in there that is a reoccurring object, a type of packaging that you see over and over again. Maybe it's Lay's potato chip packets or something, I don't know, but see what it is and see if you can eliminate that somehow. Start with one thing and see if you can reduce or eliminate that waste, and then move on to one more thing. So that's my homework number 1. So I'll go into more detail on these recycling guidelines. As I said, they're very, very simple to make it easy to see in a glance for people, for like the wide range of people who might be wanting to learn how to recycle right. If you are more interested in the details, and this is where all the questions start to spring up, especially around plastics, online you will see a full fine print details, and this is about 1/4 of the full list that you can scroll down if you go online, and it has all the little details. But the poster, remaining simple, and I'm not going to go into this too deeply. I'll concentrate mostly on plastics since that's our theme for today. Paper's pretty obvious. We all know it's cardboard, office paper, magazines, paper egg cartons. Metal is steel and aluminum cans, basically, and foil. The foil here is pictured as flat, but the guideline should be to put it in a ball. It needs to be into a loose, scrunched ball, the foil, in order to be sorted properly. Glass, bottles and jars only. And cartons are recyclable now. Plastic is the thing that is just so hard because, as we saw, so many things are made out of plastic. And you saw them talk about the resin identification codes in the triangle. Those are simply telling us what kind of plastic it is. Sadly, they are stamped on there in the chasing arrow triangle, which is very misleading because that does not mean that something is recyclable. That code on there does not mean something's recyclable. So a big piece of advice I give is forget the number. Don't look at that number and think that's telling you something's recyclable. Here's the guideline that we came up with in the task force for recycling contamination reduction in Illinois. Is plastic containers are what is recyclable through the single stream system. That's it. If it's not a container, it can't go in there. And then even then there's limits. They have to be bottles, tubs, jugs, or jars, meaning basically they're a dimensional plastic container that once held a household product and or beverage or food. That's it, basically. So bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars are the only plastic things you should be putting in to your curbside bin. Some other things made of plastic are recyclable, like plastic bags, and those can be taken clean, dry, and empty. Plastic bags can be taken to grocery stores. And I know some of the grocery stores right now, because of COVID, have stopped taking them, but Jewel Osco still will take bags. They've committed to continuing that program through this time. So they don't go in your curbside cart with stuff in them or without stuff in them. No plastic bags, please. That's the biggest contaminant that they find in the curbside recycling carts.
Jennifer, a quick question. Do you know what happens to the plastic if you take it to a Jewel Osco?
Yeah, all of the plastic, what we call plastic film, plastic wrap, and plastic bags that are taken, those go through a system to make plastic lumber product, like Trex, decking or park benches made out of it. That's mainly what it's being used for, that kind of plastic.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, and then just while I'm on that note too, there's a company that's called TerraCycle, and they have zero waste recycling boxes that you can order for, you know, they're kind of expensive for just a cardboard box, but that it's all an inclusive recycling cost for hard to recycle plastics like toothbrushes and plastic toys and things like that. So if you're interested in truly striving for zero waste, have a look at TerraCycle, T-E-R-R-A cycle. And a lot of that plastic also goes to the plastic lumber business. That's what reminded me. Here's the other big nose, and we had a hard time figuring out how to make this succinct, this piece of the poster, because there are so many things that go in that just shouldn't be in there. People put in car parts and, you know, barbecuers and basketballs and just like all kinds of things. So that kind of the big items note here includes all of the other things that we find, but especially these sorts of like propane tanks and large scrap metal that can't, and furniture cannot go in your curbside bin. There may be somewhere to take it, like a scrap metal yard. Propane tanks can often go back where they came from, you know, or a metal recycler. So look for alternatives on these. And on the county of Kane, Kane County Recycles, if you just Google that, you'll get to the webpage, and there's a whole list of A to Z options for a lot of other things and places you can take them to get them recycled. No shredded paper, please. Because it just gets loose in the facility. It can't be sorted out properly and recycled with paper. So if you have already shredded your paper at home, you can bring it to one of the King County Recycle events and we'll get it recycled with the books that are going for recycling. Just bring it in a paper bag and we'll throw it straight in. Yep, I'll come back to the part about shredding in a second. And then no tanglers. We don't want anything long and thin, strings, ropes, hoses, chains, wire, all of that stuff, hangers. They get wrapped around the machinery and break it down. So those all should stay out of there. And clothing, which is also highly reusable. And if not reusable, it's recyclable. Textiles are. So look for places that you can take those. And also the King County drop-off locations do take clothing now as well, but they don't go in the curbside bin. And then this other category here at the end, the yuck category, is just, yeah, no food or stinky stuff, no liquids, no diapers, no batteries, no chemicals, no needles. All that stuff needs to stay out and go other places. Here's just some answers to commonly asked questions that I get. So I just went ahead and threw in a slide. Caps and lids can stay on the containers now, and you may have noticed on the poster that it says caps and lids on. And that is to make it simple. So that's a simple rule. If anyone asks you, can I put on my cap or lid and recycle it? Yes, is the answer. However, if again, you're a discerning recycler, if you've got a glass jar with a metal lid, you can put those in separately. They don't have to be attached because they're different materials. And plastic caps and lids, put them back on the plastic bottles, then they go together and get captured. If you don't put a little plastic lid onto the plastic bottle, it won't get recycled because it's too small. So there's a little more detail on that. The containers should be clean and dry and empty, ideally. For peanut butter jars that are hard to clean and you don't want to use excessive water, just pop it in the dishwasher and run it through and then throw it in the recycling. I already talked about bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars only. People often ask, but what is a tub? Well, you know, margarine, sour cream, yogurt. It's a dimensional, wide-mouthed container that has a bottom and sides. And the sides are more than 1 inch. So that's how you can tell. So like clamshells are like 2 tubs hooked together. The answer is yes, you can recycle it. Clear plastic tubs that you get at the deli are recyclable, but the lids are not. Not loose, flat, thin deli lids, because they will not get captured correctly. They're not dimensional. They're not a container. So plastic trays and plastic lids, straws, utensils, all that stuff should not be going in. None of that can be captured. It's not a plastic container. It's another shape. And then black plastic is an issue because it has it has zero value on the market. And so black plastic is difficult to sort because of the way that they sort it using a laser identifier, and then it has no market. So they're, as a whole, the industry is asking that you not put black plastic in. Flexible plastic packaging we've already covered. Styrofoam cannot go in your curbside bin, but it can be taken to DART or King County Recycles. It can also be taken, there's a place in Elgin that will take it now. And that information is on the website. No frozen food boxes, because that paper is impregnated with a plastic resin. It's actually, it's a hybrid of paper and plastic that can never be taken apart again. So that is not recyclable. And then napkins, paper towels, paper plates. We see a lot of those in the recycling because people think they're paper, but they are not the kind of, they're either too thin a paper to be recycled or they have food schmutz on them. So you don't want to put them in there, but you can compost them if you compost at home. And batteries, there's lots of places to drop off batteries. If you have a look on the website, there's quite a few places. I won't go into this slide too much, but have a look on the King County Recycles webpage. There's a ton of information. This green guide is available. It's an annual paper guide that you can also have delivered to your home. If you want to email me and give me your address, I can send it to you. And it has all of these things that are listed here. It has where you can take those in your community to drop them off and get them recycled. So the event schedule for this year, on that note, the paper guide is great to have, you know, just kind of on hand if you need a quick reference guide, but things do change. As you can see, because of COVID, this is what my event schedule from this year looked like. Lots of cancellations there at the front end. But we did get kicked off and running in June. Recycling along with waste hauling was deemed essential services, and we went through the whole process of creating a safety protocol that was approved by the Kane County Health Department and by the state's attorney's office, and jumped through all the hoops there, and we all wear gloves and masks at these events. Everyone stays in their cars, and we unload from the back end of the cars. So we have 3 more left for this year. These dates are always the second Saturday of the month. September, October, November. We've got one coming up this weekend. We'll be doing electronics, clothes, and books at all of these. And then in October, we'll also be doing paint. This is a sneak preview. You all are the first people to see this 2021 event schedule. We just confirmed it last week, my boss and I don't even have it online yet because I'm still just checking with a couple other pieces to make sure it's good to go. But this is what it's going to look like. We've got document shredding back on. We have been unable to do it this year because of COVID and because I have to have too many people real close together unloading these cars to get through the 1,000 cars that we serve at a 4-hour event. We're hoping by April that it will be all right as long as we're wearing masks and gloves, and we're doing we've got 4 trucks coming, so the lines should move pretty quick. But anyway, that's a sneak preview of that. Additional fun events that we will be having as well is we've got an HHW event, that's Household Hazardous Waste for Chemicals, in Aurora on June 5th. And then November 6th, we're doing the pumpkin composting event out at Pushing the Envelope Farm in Geneva. So that's for all the holiday squashes and pumpkins that everybody will be getting rid of at that time. Rather than landfilling them, bring them out, they get composted onto the farm. We have 2 permanent drop-off locations where those 2 TV symbols are, and they take electronics and clothing. As I was saying, the green guide is available. If you want a paper copy, feel free to let me know and I'll send that out to you. Yes, I'll come back to that slide. The Kane County Connects is also another great way to get information on recycling. I do an article on recycling, if not every week, every second week. So you can sign up for Kane County Connects, and it's just an online newsletter. You can also sign up for just the weekly highlights if you prefer just to get one a week. And usually the recycling article is one of those top 5 read articles. Also, if you have events, and I know FREP does also advertise through here, but any of your community events or news that you want to get out, you can contact Rick Nagel and he will help get the word out there. Here's my second piece of homework, is share the information that you've heard today. If you learned something new, let your family know, your friends, your relatives, and just share one piece of information you learned today, and then that helps us all spread the word more. Just quickly, there's a lot of words on this, but this is also a sneak preview because on Friday we will be opening up the public comment period for the Kane County Solid Waste and Resource Management Plan update. The original one was done in the 90s. It's mandated by the state that each county should update their plan every 5 years. This is the 5-year update. The last one we did was in 2015. So this is now in a, fairly final draft form, certainly not finished, but in a form that we are happy to share with the public. It will be going out to all of the haulers and all of the composters, all of the different municipalities and stakeholders in the community. So I will be sending that out on Friday via email with a link to the plan. It is also already online if you want to have a look now. And you just go to the Kane County Recycles webpage, and then on the left-hand column there's solid waste plans. Click that, you'll see the updates right at the top, draft form, and you're free to have a look through there and submit comments. It's a 45-day comment period. You can email those, you can send them in writing, you can attend the public hearing, which will be in conjunction with the August Energy and Environmental Committee meeting, and you can come in person or you can attend online as well for those meetings now. And I would love it if you have time or interest to look at that, any of you on this call who are invested in the environmental movement, and just see how it may intersect with your work, see if anything in this plan might help you to support your work. And if something's missing, let me know. We can always add this in. And in any case, all of the public comments will be included in the appendices of the plan, unless it's expressed that you don't want it in there. So that even if you're saying, hey, what about this idea? What about that idea? Those will be in writing in the plan, in the appendix as well. So even if they don't get incorporated into the body, they will be represented there. So I'd love some input on that. And thank you so much for having me here today, and for your concern about recycling.
I think you had one question that came up in the chat.